Stretching the meaning of current events to its absolute limits, I am going all the way back to 1903 because any experience where you go into a building that has people en masse, this event shapes your experience today. You would think the people who build the Titanic as being unsinkable would have looked back less than a decade and seen the folly of the people at the Iroquois Theater naming their theater Fireproof. It was the holiday season. We're looking just 2 days till the new year in the busy Chicago shopping district called The Loop, wildly popular with women. Police there actively patrolled the streets, the alleys, and all the shops so the ladies felt safe. The kids were home from school because of the holiday season. There was a little bit of snow falling, but no wind. The roads were icy, the sidewalks were icy, but hey, this is Chicago. At the Iroquois Theater, which has only been open for about 5 weeks at this point, opulent, grand, beautiful, one of the finest theaters in the country. Mr. Bluebeard, a wildly popular, family-friendly comedy musical, was playing as the maiden show at the Iroquois Theater. Now, the Iroquois was rated for 1,600 people, but today, December the 30th, the matinee showing, they had over 2,000 people in attendance. The reason they were able to put in 2,000 people into this building that only held 1,600 is, number one, they oversold. This was a common practice back in the day, just like airlines do today. They oversold the tickets knowing that there was going to be snow, expecting a large percentage of people to not show up. Everybody showed up. Everybody wanted to see this. There was standing room. That was a common practice as well. If all the seats had been taken, you were able to stand behind the seats on the platforms, and they sold those up to 4 people deep at the time. Also, even though there may have been some rules against it, seating in the aisles, on the floors around the stage, and on the staircases was accepted. Some people even brought deck chairs, fold-out chairs, and sat in the aisles. Of course, blocking exits, which didn't play well on this day in the theater. At 3:15, there was a scene change. It went from a daytime scene to a nighttime scene where couples, being romantic or waltzing about together, there were 8 couples on the stage. As the lights dimmed, an arc light sparked and started one of the curtains behind the proscenium arch about 15 feet off the ground on fire. The audience didn't panic because, according to eyewitnesses, it looked like mood lighting. There was blue light from one side of the stage and then some reddish, yellowish light from the other side of the stage, and the dancers were dancing. The dancers at this point had not noticed the fire just above their head. Off stage, the resident fireman, the theater had employed a fireman, and a couple of stagehands were trying to put out this flame that was 15 feet off the ground. They were trying to use the kill fire extinguishers. The kill fire, not much more than just a tube that had baking powder inside of it. It wasn't charged, wasn't powered. It was just a box of powder. Well, these guys are on the ground, off stage, trying to put out a fire 15 feet up, so it's a good 8 feet, 9 feet above their heads maybe, not having any success. One of the stagehands grabs a pole, decides he's going to knock the flaming curtain off the wall. All he manages to do is shower the dancers with sparks, which looks like a special effect. The flame starts to grow, and if you know live theater, the scenery will be sometimes pulled up into what's called the flyway. That scenery is made of canvas and painted with oil paints, which are incredibly flammable. Well, now, Eddie Foy is backstage. He realizes something's up. He comes out, he sees the flame, he sees it's an actual problem, and he stops the show and tells people to remain calm and proceed towards the exits. As Eddie is standing on the stage, part of the scenery up in the flyway bursts into flames and falls down, crashes to the stage. The calm evaporates and panic ensues. People run en masse towards the exits. First off, there were no lighted exit signs. There were ornamental windows that looked like exits, so you had groups of people trying to open doors that did not exist. Some of the doors and the gates that would have led to the exits had been bolted shut in an effort to keep people who had bought cheap seats from sneaking down in the dark and sitting in nicer seats down on the floor. Also, some of the exit doors opened inwards. So when the people got to the doors and tried to open them, people behind them in the crowd pushed them against the doors and they were stuck. When the fire department actually got inside, they found bodies around some of the exit doors, 10 people deep. Many people in the balconies ran towards the fire escapes. Many of the fire escapes were not finished, too small, didn't go all the way to the ground, and they were icy. Some people just jumped. Those people died. Some people slipped, and some people were pushed by the crowd behind them trying to get out onto the fire escape. The secondary jumpers, or people who fell or who were pushed, lived because of the piles of bodies on the sidewalk below them. What did save some of the people in the balconies that managed to get to the fire escapes were the people in the office building just across the alley grabbed some long ladders and shimmied those out the windows, laid them on the fire escapes. There were illustrations in the newspaper of these men holding ladders and helping ladies in long dresses and big hats across these ladders suspended 3 stories up in the air. One of the biggest heroes of the day was an unnamed railroad worker who had been passing by and happened to have his tools with him. He rushed to the scene and using his tools managed to break some hinges on some big doors and saved dozens of people. About the same time, some of the actors who were trapped on stage, some with flaming costumes because the scenery had fallen onto them, managed to break open the scenery doors where you load in the scenery from the back. As soon as they broke those doors open, there was a rush of fresh, cold air into the building, which mixed with the superheated air and caused a fireball that blew out underneath the curtain and engulfed the audience, and sucking all the oxygen out of the room, extinguishing the fire. But by the time the fire department, the police, passers-by, and funeral directors arrived, the fire was out. The estimates vary a little bit, but it seems that 573 people, about that number, died that day in the theater from fire, from smoking inhalation, and from falling from the balconies. Another 30 people died later in the hospitals, but it's estimated that there were another 350 people who were seriously burned and injured. Plus, a lot of people at that time, since the auditorium was mostly filled with women and children, a lot of the women who had children who had died just wrapped them up in their skirts and took their babies home. So the actual number is unknown of how many people died because of the incident. Even though many people knew about the safety shortcomings of the building, nobody was held liable. Theater owners and the corporation that had built the theater were blameless or not liable, according to a judge, because the city had signed off on all the construction. The local government was not held liable because the Iroquois Theater had an employee who was a fireman. The architect was not liable because the construction crews had gone ahead and continued working without his final blueprints that held his official stamp. Lawsuits went on for 3 years plus until they were finally dismissed by the judge, who said none of the investors, none of the government people, none of the employees actually were the people who put the arc lamp next to that curtain. Worldwide outrage ensued. Some good did come from this. These are the things that came from that event that affect you and me in our daily lives now. Mandatory exit signs, automatic fire doors, mandatory sprinkler systems, automatic ventilation systems, mandatory fire alarms, mandatory handheld fire extinguishers, and probably one of the biggest things was the mass adoption worldwide of the panic bar operated outward opening doors, which had been invented a few years earlier, but had not yet caught on. All in all, it was a tragedy. But because of these safety standards, I believe that many more people than the 600 plus people who died in Chicago in 1903, I think many more people have been saved because of the safety measures that have been put in place. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me and looking at this event that happened here in our history and really, sadly, has benefited you and me.